Hi, welcome to Hump Day Wednesday and
Hey, how you doing?
Relationship Talk with Beth Lee and Mr. Dan IT Guy.
That's me.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're so happy that you're here. I don't know how long this live is going to be, just because it is really, really hot here. We're melting. Like
Sweating.
there's actually a pool under me. It's hot. So it's not just hot, it's humid.
It is. Very
So
humid, yes.
And we're complaining because it's been really, really nice this summer where it's only been in the 70s. So we're not used to this anymore. But we just wanted to say welcome. We are so happy that you're here. We're so happy that all of you people that come in after the live is done and watch later, thank you so much for doing that. Thank you for supporting this channel. Our main goal with this channel is basically just to minister to other people, and have you minister to us too, because our relationship is not perfect. We get into little scuffles here and there, and that's just the way marriage goes, And so your ministry to us is really helpful as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
So if you like the channel, we encourage you to like, subscribe, and comment. Where's that banner at? You know where it's at. There we go. So if you ever have any questions, you can always email me. I'll put that email address. Dan will put that email address on there. So you can always email, and I promise I'll answer your emails. Last week, we talked about hope, and we talked about how things can change in your marriage. So we had a little interesting experience last week that I don't know if anyone who was watching caught it. We have our back door here that we have a little string that's attached to it so that it doesn't go blowing open.
Right there.
Yes, right there. And so during the live last week, I read a little excerpt from my book that's coming out soon. And at the point where I mentioned my mom, the door closed and then it opened up again. Now, the wind was blowing like the whole time during the live, but that's the only time that it did anything like that. And so Destroyer actually caught that and told us about it later.
Yeah.
And when we saw
I saw it happen.
I didn't. I think I was so consumed with what I was reading.
And I wasn't going to interrupt you.
It was crazy, though.
Yeah.
That was crazy. But anyways, hope. So we talked about hope last week and remaining positive, looking for positives with your spouse and writing those things down. That was part of your homework from last week, was to write some of those positives down that you find with your spouse and what hopeful things you see in your marriage. And we talked about that afterwards, about like making plans for the future and how, sorry, we've got a tractor going by. The joys of living in the country.
I actually love it.
I do too. So anyways, where was I going? Oh yeah. So keeping hope alive. We talked about it, about how like we tend to make plans, 3 or 4 years in advance. And hi, Mama San, how are you?
Hey, Mama San.
And so we try to, plan ahead a little bit. That's something that helps to keep the positivity going with us, is remaining hopeful for our plans in the future and seeing the good things in our marriage.
Yeah. Celebrating the good things in our marriage.
Yeah, all those happy memories that we talked about a few weeks ago, and making more happy memories.
Yep.
It's always fun. So we talked about also things can change in your relationship, and really trying to take an inventory of yourself first and see what things you can change about, what you're doing in your marriage. What things can you change? Maybe tone of voice, or the way that you're reacting to certain things going on. Always start with yourself when you want changes to begin. When you want changes to occur around you, always start with yourself first. What can you change? And then talk about it with your spouse. So that was part of your homework too. So anyways, this week we're going to talk about communication. So where is it? Here we go. So anyways, this week we're talking about communication. So communication is really a key component to a marriage. you really need to just talk to each other, right?
Yeah.
No,
wait a sec.
What are you doing? Don't end the show.
I thought that was it.
No.
We talked about communication.
No, we didn't talk about no, we introduced the topic. We didn't talk about it.
Okay.
No, it's not done yet.
Oops.
Apparently some of us need some tips on communicating.
Guess I'm not very good communicator.
Anyway, so this week, communication. So we've talked about it a little bit here and there. Don't hit the button again. Don't do it. Hands off. So we've talked about communicating in several of our different lives, and we've talked a lot about, communicating with your spouse, sharing things with your spouse. So what can help you with that? What are some issues that come up with communication? Some of the issues that we know just from our experience, having these devices in your hand when you're having a discussion doesn't work. I love playing games on my phone. We love, checking up on Facebook and Instagram and all that kind of stuff.
Put the phone down.
Yes, please.
Put it down.
Put the phone down if you're having a discussion. I mean, if you're just talking about the weather and how excruciatingly hot it is, don't worry about it. But if you're having a discussion about something that really matters, put your phone down. Really. Facebook will still be there later. You can always look at it later. So that's not paying attention to one another.
Yeah. So
another one is sometimes we forget to look for body language cues. Body language cues are huge. We speak, most of our communication is done non-verbally. I believe the percentage is like 85% is nonverbal communication. So you communicate with. I do. It's 85%. So most of your communication is nonverbal. So how you're sitting, or if you're leaning towards one another, or if you're looking at one another, the look on your face, hand movements, things like that. It's all of those things are communicating something. I talk with my hands all the time, though. I think I'm part Italian, but not really.
Never know.
I don't think I am, but it looks like I probably am because I talk with my hands all the time. But body language cues. For example, men, if your wife is sitting way over on the other side of the couch and she's got her legs tucked up underneath her, she's got her arms crossed in front of her, she's looking down or away from you, not saying anything to you, and you look over and say, is something wrong? And her answer is really short, like, I'm fine. Probably best to maybe ask a follow-up question like, is there something that you want to talk about? Saying something along the lines of, what's your effing problem? That's probably not the way to go about getting a good result if that's your wife's body language. So if that body language is telling you that her legs, she's sitting far apart from you, so she doesn't want closeness. Her legs tucked up underneath her, her arms crossed in front of her. She's trying to protect herself. With her looking down or away from you, she's trying to protect herself and her feelings. And with her giving a short, concise answer like that, she's not fine. But she's probably trying to just think of a nicer way of explaining things, or she needs extra time to verbalize what she's feeling. So give her a little bit of time, and don't ask silly questions that are going to get you into trouble. Just don't do that. Girls, if your husband is sitting there and I don't know, twitching his leg or looking away from you, being super quiet, that might be a sign that he's upset about something. So maybe ask nicely, kindly, is there something that you wanted to talk about? And if he says no, then I'm here whenever you want to talk. And just being kind to one another, recognizing, look for those body language cues. So we'll talk more about that in a little bit, but excuse me. Another problem with communication is people not listening very well. And we're going to talk more. We're not going to talk about that right now. We're going to talk about that next week when we talk about active listening and how to listen better. So we'll talk about that later. And then not speaking clearly or effectively. And last week I read a little bit from my book, and I'm feeling more confident reading from the book now that it's in the final phases of editing and proofing and all that. So, and copyright.
Yeah.
So now I can share a little more about my book. So I wanted to read a little more. Dan and I've had our issues with speaking clearly. Dan, the IT guy, sometimes will speak in acronyms. Hence the idea for acronyms for another show that we're part of.
Yeah.
Destroyer knows. Anyways, he thinks he's being concise with these acronyms. The problem is I do not understand what some of his acronyms mean because I've never worked in that field. So a few years ago, I stated, I don't understand your code language. He looked at me like I was crazy and retorted, those are easy to figure out. I then began talking to him in police codes that I used when I was a 911 operator and asked, how easy is it to figure out what I'm trying to say? It's easy for me. He stopped using so many acronyms. If you want your partner to understand what you're trying to say, use language that the other person will understand.
I mean, sometimes it's an acronym, but it's like a name of a company or something.
Right. But like some of them that you throw, I don't remember, some of them that you've thrown out there, I didn't understand at all. And I'm like, I don't get that at all.
It was all telecommunications stuff.
Yeah.
And it's, you talk about it so much when you're a project manager that's all you ever say is.
Well, I get it.
It just happens.
Yeah. My coworkers and I talked in code all the time, and
it's not really talking code. You're just talking about specific things,
Well, we had our acronyms like Adam Henry, but we don't need to go into what that means. Anyways. Speak in a calm voice. No need to shout. Make sure that your point of view is clear and concise. This has been my problem. Being a writer, I like to use a lot of words. Many times my point is lost in the multitude of words. Sometimes less is more. My dad used to tell me, don't build a bridge, just get across the river. So I tell myself that now. And Dan's told me that a few times here and there.
Maybe.
Can you just get across the river already? That'd be great. Yeah. Nothing is more frustrating than a spouse who loves the sound of her own voice, droning on and on for hours without giving her spouse an opportunity to voice his issues or give feedback. Keep in mind that your spouse also has a point of view, and it's not kind to overlook his concerns simply because you want to nail down your points. So we've talked about that a lot, that we're both really smart people, and we both have a lot to say.
Yeah. And
there's just times where we don't let the other person speak.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm trying more and more not to talk so much and let Dan talk more, but just because he has a lot of funny things to say. Like he's hilarious. Anyway.
Yeah.
So.
I'm a Gen X. What can I tell you?
Another part of communication, learn to speak to your spouse, not at your spouse. To your spouse, not at your spouse. Speaking to your spouse implies respect for him or her and allows time for them to hear your words and respond. Speaking at your spouse implies a lecture type format. So a few years ago, I think it was when we first got married. I don't know. Maybe 5 years into our marriage or something. We were raising the kids by then.
Yeah.
So we sat down to have some kind of discussion about something. And Dan said to me, I had been going on for, 20 minutes probably by then. And he finally interrupted me and he said, he raised his hand and said, I have a question. I'm like, okay. And he said, is this a lecture? Because I don't remember signing up for it. So that kind of stopped me cold in my tracks because I'm like, coming from an education background, you give a lot of lectures. I've taught in different agencies I've worked at or whatever, homeschooled Michael for a long time. And you just get used to that lecture format where you're the one talking and the other person is just silent. So we had to kind of overcome that a little bit.
Yep. We had
Yes.
to work on our communication.
Yeah. But we just had an incident today where we had to deal with this same aspect of speaking to someone instead of speaking at. We're making dinner. Our dog Tessa starts barking at us, like just barking and barking and barking at us. And Dan said, I think that you need to tell her what's what, because she's not understanding. That's rude. So I had to explain to her, you have to speak to us, not speak at us. And she quietly listened, and then she was calm. So we did a high five, and everything was good. So our dog even has to learn that lesson. Yes. So it takes time, like realizing that you're being disrespectful to your spouse. It's that can be difficult to acknowledge, and so it takes a little bit of time to practice that skill of speaking to instead of speaking at. Mama San, you're exactly right. Dogs are people too. They are. Lily is very, very respectful. She, sits down and wags her tail very politely. Tessa barks at us all the time. So she's got a bit of an attitude problem.
Yeah. If you ever want to see some funny dog content, you got to go and look at her shorts.
Especially the one where Dan is narrating the difference between our dogs.
Yeah.
It's perfect because Lily's very polite. Tess, not so much. Tess needs some lessons in communication. So Mama and Tessa are probably going to have a little discussion after this, because I know she's scratching at the door right now.
Yep.
So another tip that we have talked about before that is really important to us. It's worked wonders for us. The 2-minute rule. And I know we've brought it up before. We're just going to keep bringing it up. So you're just going to have to get used to it. Because it really does work. It really does. It doesn't even matter what kind of conversation you're having, what kind of discussion you're having. It really does work. Being able to pass an object back and forth to each other and really listen to what the other person is saying.
Yeah.
It gives you time to sort through what you're thinking. And it gives you a chance to calm down too. A lot of people say about taking breathing or counting to 10 or something. This gives you 2 minutes to be quiet and calm down. And it works wonders.
It does. Yeah, you don't have a choice. You calm down. I think we've noticed that, maybe the third or fourth time we pass the object back and forth, that's when we start to really okay. Yeah, we're stupid. All right.
I was totally being a jerk.
Yeah.
And I should have listened. I should have asked how he was feeling, or I should have done this. And you really start thinking about the other person, because you have no choice but to listen. And it's done wonders for us. Yeah. It really has. So recently, I want to say it was a couple of months ago, we had a disagreement which escalated into an argument. We took up our battle stations on opposite sides of the kitchen table, defended our behavior and our words, and began throwing verbal daggers. We decided it was getting late and went to bed in separate rooms. Upon waking up, we realized immediately that neither of us would budge from our point of view. What began as a trivial disagreement was now a battle of wits, harmful words, and sarcasm. We separated by each going to our offices to work for the day, intentionally avoiding one another. After a silent, painful dinner, we decided to try to talk things out. That conversation seemed to be headed in the wrong direction, with both of us speaking on top of one another and neither of us really listening. That was a terrible conversation that night.
Yeah, it was terrible.
It was terrible. I picked up a box of tissues finally and suggested that perhaps we needed to utilize the 2-minute rule so each of us would feel heard. After each of us had a couple of turns, there was a shift in the tone of our voice and the words each of us were using. We were actually listening to one another and not simply waiting for our turn to talk. The argument ended soon after with a clear resolution. So, it's worked so well for us just to be able to give the other person that opportunity to talk. And so the rules for that, you take a small object, whoever's holding it has the responsibility of conveying what you're thinking, conveying your feelings, and speaking with intention, speaking kindly.
As kindly as you can.
Yes. At that time. The other person, the other person who's not holding the object, your job is to listen. Not roll your eyes, not laugh under your breath, not make little comments. Your job is to listen. And I will say the first couple of times, the first time that we passed the object back and forth, we're still both very heated, very passionate about our point of view. This is my point of view. I want to get it across.
Yeah.
And so that first time passing the object back and forth, we're both rolling our eyes and making little comments under our breath and taking mental notes. Oh, this point I'm going to hit. This point I'm going to hit. This, I'm going to come back at these points. After the second or third time passing the object back and forth, the feelings come out, and that intentional speaking, and then after that, we're able to set the object down and actually have a conversation without talking over one another, without being rude to one another, without throwing those verbal daggers at one another. Yeah. And it's really helped us. If you, in the comments, if you guys have any other suggestions that you've tried, please feel free to make comments and let us know other things that you've tried. I know, looking on the internet for tips on good communication is always a great idea too. The internet has a lot of stuff, though.
Yes. It certainly does. Maybe some things that you don't necessarily want to watch. But yeah. Maybe. So, like I said, today's topic is pretty short. I didn't want to talk you to death during communication, But your homework for this week, have a conversation this week with your spouse using the 2-minute rule and just see if it works for you. And, maybe you could talk about a recent disagreement that you had. Maybe you could talk about unresolved feelings that you have. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about sitting down and having a conversation about sex and things like that. You could have a conversation about that using the 2-minute rule. Yep. And things that you want or things that you want to change. You could talk about the stress you're feeling with work or with the kids. It doesn't have to be a real serious conversation. You could tell jokes for your whole 2 minutes. Don't care. Just use the 2-minute rule for one conversation that you have for this week and just see how effective it is for you. And the other part of your homework is play the body language game with each other. So it's kind of like charades, where you're each gonna think of 2 or 3 topics that or scenarios that you can act out using body language. So maybe it's that one of you is angry, or maybe one of you is really horny. Maybe one of you is really hungry, or maybe you're stressed out about the kids, or maybe you're surprised by what you got in the mail. Any kind of scenario like that. Try and act it out with body language and see if the other person can guess what you're trying to convey. And make it fun. Yeah. Have some silly or sexy prizes, whatever you want to do, but just make it fun. That's kind of the point of marriage. Yeah. Make it fun. Have fun when you're communicating. Just be kind. It's part of your job is.
Yes, exactly.
Making it fun for each other.
Yes.
Making it fun for everybody else.
Exactly. So next week, like I said, we're going to talk about listening skills. It's a great follow-up for communication. We've been talking about talking, and next week we're going to talk about listening and giving constructive feedback. So yeah. That's what we're going to talk about next week. So let me get over here to this side over here. Anyways, it's really, really hot here, and I hear there's a debate tonight. So we're going to let y'all go. We hope you have a wonderful week, and we will see you next week. Bye.
See you guys.